Hey everyone, welcome back. If you ever wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but not sure where to start, stick with me and I'm going to take you down that path today. Today I'm going to walk you through all the essentials from holding your guitar, tuning your guitar, strumming, getting your first chords under your belt, and that'll get you on your way to playing your first songs. Let's get started. First things first, to get started, let's talk about the guitar in general. I want you to know a couple parts of the guitar. That's going to help you understand as I'm talking through how to hold it, how to play it, where to put your hands, etc. So looking at the guitar, and your guitar may vary. This is the Squier Debut. Up top here, you're going to have your headstock. On your headstock, you're going to have your tuners. That's going to be important because we're going to tune the guitar with these tuner heads right here. Okay, so we'll turn those to tighten the strings or loosen the strings. That'll put it in tune. Just below that, we'll have the nut. That's where the strings pass through, and that's going to be the point where it's going to rest against there and the bridge and allow it to vibrate and make your tone. Okay. Between that nut and the bridge, we have a couple areas that we want to focus on. This being the neck. Within the neck, you have the fretboard, and then you have the actual frets. So the frets are these wires, these steel wires, and when we go to fret a note or hold a note, we're going to be putting our finger right behind that fret wire. What that's doing is shortening the distance between the nut and the bridge, and that's going to change the pitch. Just like that. Okay. Now once we get to the body, this whole area is the body of the guitar. We're generally, if we're working with an electric guitar, we're going to have a few pickups. In this case, we have 3 single coil pickups. You may have humbucker pickups, either 1, 2, or a combination of these. So a humbucker and a single, or a humbucker, single, humbucker, or just 2 humbuckers, etc. Humbuckers will look similar to a single coil, but it's going to have 2 of them stacked together, side by side. As we move down, I've mentioned before that this is your bridge. This is actually a floating bridge. Not entirely floating. I have it set so that it's resting against the body, and I suggest you do the same with yours as well. But that's going to allow your strings to come up through the guitar and then rest against these saddles. And these saddles are adjustable, so they can go up and down to bring your strings further or closer to the frets. With this particular guitar, I have a 5-way switch, so I have 5 positions. We'll talk about that shortly. And then I have a volume control that's going to be the volume for all the output, and then 2 different tone controls. One tone control on this guitar is going to allow me to adjust the tone on these 2 pickups, and then the other tone control will allow me to adjust it on the bridge. Now that we know the parts of the guitar, let's talk about how we want to hold the guitar and sit. I like to sit with the guitar resting on my right leg. I'm right-handed, so I'm going to strum with my right hand. I'm going to fret with my left hand, and I'm going to rest it on my right leg. You can rest it on your left leg, and if you step on something or elevate it, you have a nice resting position here. And this is actually a pretty good neutral position for the guitar to sit, and it gives you really good access to the fretboard. You may find this to be more comfortable, and that's fine too. What you'll notice is a lot of guitar players are going to rest it on their right leg. It's going to push the body a little bit further back here, and it might give them a little more access for the fretboard. It might be a little bit more comfortable when they're gripping their chords and things like that. Again, that's going to be preferential, so whichever you prefer, get used to holding that. Now, regardless of where you place the guitar, you do want to make sure that you're sitting up nice and straight. We all have a tendency to hunch over at times, especially when we're playing and we're really thinking about where we want to fret. We might concentrate and kind of bury our head down, and we'll get into this position and round our back a lot. That's going to tire us out. It's going to cause some different soreness in your back, your arm, shoulder, things like that, and your neck as well. So it is better if you get started today and from now on sitting up nice and straight. When you need to identify where you're putting your fingers, go ahead and take a look, but then sit up nice and straight and strum or pluck those strings, however you're practicing at that time. But try to have that posture upright. Left hand on the neck. Let's talk about how we want to hold it. So if I take a look at my hand, I want to kind of turn it over with my thumb towards the sky. I'm going to set that right behind the neck. Now if you notice, I'm not wrapping up and around to get started. In the future, you'll probably incorporate that a little bit more. But to get started, I would say let's keep it towards the back of the neck. And I'm going to have it a little more towards the top here, not necessarily all the way behind. But what we're going to want to almost do is have a claw when we're getting our first chords. So that means my thumb's going to be behind the neck. My fingers are going to be on top of the frets and the strings where I want to play them. Let's talk about using a pick. So we can use our fingers to play. So I might use my thumb to strum my strings. I might use my finger to strum upward. So if I want to play that same chord, I can go down, up. If I want to pick a few, and I can use all my fingers, and that's fine too. However, most people are going to start with a pick. When you're holding your pick, it's going to be real important to kind of establish a grip that's repeatable for you and comfortable. Normally, we'll kind of take our finger out like this and we'll rest it right around that first knuckle with our finger probably pointing down about 45 degrees like that. And then we'll take our thumb across it like that. Okay, so I know that's hard to see, but I only want a little bit of that sticking out. Okay, so let's take a look there, see if we can get it in focus. But I only want a little bit of that pick sticking out when I go to strum. And again, my finger's going to kind of be pointed downward like that, and my thumb straight across. Okay, that's going to be the best way to hold your pick. Now, you can play with that a little bit. Some players actually use two fingers. So they'll use two fingers like that when they're strumming. And then they'll switch that grip back to a more traditional grip to play single strings, single notes, single strings, things like that. That gives you a lot more control. Next, let's talk about tuning your guitar. So I have two different ways I'm going to tune. I'm going to first use the headstock tuner, clip-on tuner. I'll clip that right to the headstock like that and turn it on. Now with it on, you won't be able to see it here, but when you pluck that string, it's going to have a little scale or a little gauge that's going to go past your note or short of that note. If it goes past, that means we're sharp or we have too much tension on the string. So I got to loosen that string up, slowly tighten it till I'm in pitch. And I'll go through each string and I'll do that. Now it's important to tune every time you go to play the guitar. Temperature changes, whether it's morning or evening, if your house is a little bit cooler in the morning, a little bit warmer in the afternoon, day by day temperature's going to change, and your neck and your strings are going to change a little bit. So every time you sit down to play, go ahead and tune your guitar. Now the next method is I'm going to use my cell phone. So let me turn that on. And I've actually downloaded a Fender tuner. This is a standard tuner. This is going to listen to the string and tell me if I'm in tune or not. There's also a Pro tuner, so it'll pick up the string, and I'll kind of try to show you that a little bit. So it says I'm just a little sharp on that. Okay. But I'll generally set that right on my leg there. And there we go, we're in tune. Now, if you're tuning your guitar for the first time, it's going to be important to know what you're tuning to. So we're going to tune to what we call standard E. And that's our lowest note here is going to be an E standard. So when you set up your tuner, if you get a clip-on tuner, it's automatically set to E standard. If you're going to use an app, you may have to double check and make sure that you're in E standard. Now what that means is you're going to tune each string to its open pitch. In this case here, E standard means that my lowest note, my number 6 string bass note, is going to be an E. The next one is going to be an A, so my 5th string is an A. D for my 4th string. G for my 3rd. B, as in boy, for my 2nd string. And then E again for my 1st string. So notice I numbered those from 1 to 6 from the top or the bottom of the guitar furthest away from you, it's the highest pitch. So we say that's the top, or that's the high note, that's the number 1 string, an E. And then my low E, my bass E, my number 6 string is going to be the low E. Okay, so a good way to remember those open notes: E, A, D, G, B, E, Eddie, 8, dynamite, goodbye, Eddie. That's what I was taught when I was a kid, and that's always stuck. You may find your own way to remember it, but you got to know those open strings, especially when you're tuning. The next thing I want to teach you is a couple of your first chords and the basics of strumming. So strumming, we're going to either strum all 6 strings or just a few strings at a time. So I'm going to mute my strings by just gently resting my hand here, and you'll hear what that sounds like when I'm strumming. So when I go to strum and I'm going to strum all 6 strings, I'm going to nice and loose with my wrist. I'm going to go from top, or your bottom string, to your top string, down. As we begin strumming, there's going to be 4 common note lengths that we'll talk about within what we call a measure. So there's generally, when we're going to be working with basic music or tab or things like that, we're going to probably start with 4/4 standard, which is 4 beats within a measure, each one measuring 1/4 of that measure. So a quarter note is going to be 1/4. So there's going to be 4 of those within a whole measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We would strum on each one of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. We also have half notes that will take up half of that measure. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I were going to strum that, and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that. Now I'm muting the strings. If I wasn't muting those strings, I would let those ring out for those 2 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, the next one we want to learn is a whole note, and that's going to take up the whole measure. So we'll actually count that for 4 beats. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I strum that on that down beat, that 1 beat, and I held it for all 4 beats. Now there's another one that we can learn, and that's going to be our 8th. So that's going to be each quarter note and 1 in between. So generally we would count that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we would strum down and up on each one of those. So in this case, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay? When you get started strumming and you start to learn your first songs, your first chords, I would stick with a whole note. Play it for that whole measure. Let it ring out. While you're switching to your next one, let that ring out for a whole measure. Then as you get better, we can go to half notes, quarter notes, 8th notes, and so on. So now that we talked a little bit about strumming, let's talk about your first chords. So the first couple chords I want to teach you is an E major, an E minor, an A major, an A minor, and a D. So we're going to stick with E, A, and D for now. I'll show you E minor and A minor, but focus on the E, A, and D. So starting with the E, if I'm looking at the fretboard here, on my E string, since that's going to be the root, it's going to be open, and I'm going to strum that. Using my first 3 fingers, I'm going to take my middle finger and rest that on the A string on the 2nd fret. And then I'm going to use my ring finger, and I'm going to also fret at the 2nd fret on the 4th string, which is the D string. So I have E, those 3 strings there, and then I'm going to take my index finger on my G string, and I'm going to hold down the 1st fret. So if I play all of those together, it sounds like this. That's an E major. Now, when you're first learning to fret a chord, you're going to want to take your time, put each finger down. So if you want to start with your index finger, then your middle finger, then your index finger, play each string slowly. So I'll play it like this. And what I'm looking for is any dead notes. So maybe like that. So my fingers are touching another string or they're not pressing all the way down. Okay, so I'm going to fret each one and strum slowly through there, listening for any of those issues. If I'm not quite making the note, I might need to press a little bit harder. You only want to press as hard as you need to fret out that note. Just like that. Okay. Now once I get that down and I'm comfortable with that, that's when I can start strumming. So let's try that whole note strum. So going 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Once I get comfortable with that, I'll do half notes, quarter notes, and so on to get comfortable with strumming that. The next one I want to teach you is your A. Now your A, we're not going to strum all 6 strings. We're actually going to strum from our A string, which is the 5th string. So we're not going to play the low E string. We're going to play from A down. And I'm going to want to fret at the 2nd fret, my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th string. And there are a few ways to do that. You can use your index, middle, and ring finger together on all 3. You can use your middle, ring, and pinky if that's more comfortable. Or another technique that I like to use is putting my index finger on my 3rd string, my middle finger on my 4th, and my ring finger on my 2nd string. I know that's a little bit tougher to see, but just like that. Okay? And when I strum that, I can still hear each one of those notes clearly. Now the reason I might do that is you'll notice that my index finger is then anchored on that 3rd string. So I can actually slide that down 1 fret and then just move my next 2 fingers and go to my E. So I have A to E. Now that I know both of those chords, I can start to learn several songs with that. So you can look online 2 chord songs. Buffalo Springfield is a good example of that. You can learn that with just those 2 chords alternating. So once you get that under your belt, start doing whole notes. Switch to your A, back to your E, and so on. Then you can move to half notes, going back and forth. So hold it for 2 beats, then 2 beats, 2 beats, and so on. The last chord I want to show you is your D. Your D is going to be very similar as far as your anchor goes, right? So my index finger can stay right there, just like I had it for my A. I can lift up my other fingers and keep my index finger right there on my 3rd string, 2nd fret. I'll use my middle finger and I'll put it on the 1st fret of my 1st string, then my 2nd fret with my ring finger on my 2nd string. Now that's going to be a little bit more difficult for new hands, but again, take your time with that. It should sound like this. The other thing I need to take note of is I'm not playing all 6 strings or 5 strings like I did with the A chord. My root is actually now the D string, the open D string. We call these open chords because I don't have to fret anything else other than these notes, and some of the other ones can freely ring out open. So this is open D, open A, open E. With those 3 chords, you can play hundreds of songs. I told you I'd teach you 2 more chords, an E minor and an A minor. Now those 2 are pretty simple, and I feel once you get comfortable with playing those 3 major chords, it's really easy to add these 2 to your chord library or your repertoire. So E minor, all we're going to do is lift up our index finger. This is one of the easiest chords to play. My middle and ring are going to fret the 2nd fret on my 4th and 5th strings, and I'm going to play all 6 strings. Now notice a major sounds happy and a minor sounds sad. So happy, sad. E major with the index finger, E minor without. Now the A minor, again, another easy one to play once you've learned your E and your A. You're going to take that E major shape, so those 3 fingers, and I'm actually just going to drop them down 1 string on each. So now I have the 1st fret of my 2nd string with my index finger, and then the 2nd fret of both my 4th and 3rd string with my middle and ring, just playing my high 5 strings, right? So A down through my 1st string, 1 string, okay? Notice that sound versus happy, sad, major, minor. So again, with those chords added, now you have 5 chords that you can play thousands of songs with, okay? That's going to get you started playing chords, playing songs today. Now, before I let you go, I want to cover one more thing. A couple basic strumming patterns. We've talked about how to down strum, and we're down strumming on a whole note for 4 beats, a half note for 2 beats, a quarter note for 1 beat each. Now, I want to teach you how to do an up stroke as well, and once we learn that, we can learn some different basic strumming patterns. Okay, so downstroke, we're just going straight down. Upstroke, I'm really reversing that, I'm just coming up. But there is one thing I want to point out. When I'm holding my pick, I'm going to tilt it like this when I do a downstroke. That helps me glide across all 6 strings. So if I'm going to play one of those E chords, okay, I have it tilted down like this, just a little bit. When I strum up, I want to tilt it the other way, just a little bit. If I keep it tilted down, I'm going to get hung up on those strings. So when you're strumming, you're going to tilt away and then back towards you and away and back towards you. So just like that. Once we learn our strumming and we learn a couple chords, I'm going to jump back into this tuning app. There are a couple things in this tuning app that I think it's important. So this is the Fender Tune, and I believe that's free for everyone if you download it and sign up. There's a couple things on here that's important. 1, there's tuner. 2, there is a chord library. So you have a little section here that's called Tools. So I can click on that. I can go to Chords, and I can look up any of the chords that we've talked about. So I can 5 easy chords for beginners. Here's an E minor, G, C, D, A minor. We didn't cover all of those. Those are fairly easy. Again, I like to go through a couple of the essentials. The A, E, D, there's so many things you can play with that. So I can go from D, A, to E. D, A, E. Just like that. There's so many different songs that you can play with those chords. But you have a chord library. You can find chords. You can look up chords. That's a really important tool. There's also scales, rhythm, and then important, just as important as all the others, there's a metronome. Now a metronome is going to set a beat for you, and it's going to give you a click or a beep or whatever you set it to. I'm going to play that for you so you can hear. This is at 90 beats per minute. You'll notice that on the 1, there's a slightly different tone. That lets me know that's the 1 beat. Now let's slow this down. I'm going to stop it. And I'm going to slow it down to 60. Now there's several things that I can do once I set this to 60 to help me practice. It's a nice slow beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. When I'm strumming, I can strum a whole note. 3, 4, and I can go quarter notes or half notes. Then I can go quarter notes on each beat. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, an important concept to get to know is when you're counting, each one of those beats is my whole beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. In between, we generally use and to separate. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If we go tighter than that, we can go 1E and a, 2E and a, 3E and a. But I would suggest we start with 1, 2, 3, 4. That's counting on the quarter notes. All right. If you're listening to drums, that might be a bass and a kick or a snare. So boom, tss, boom, tss, boom, tss, and so on. If you want to start to count in between, just use the ands. That's where we incorporate some up strokes. So we can go 1 and 2 and 3. Now that's really slow. If I go back to my metronome, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So get used to playing both with a metronome and with those and beats, because now we can start to incorporate some strumming patterns. So we can go a common one, 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3, 4, 1, 2 and 3, 4. Okay. We can also go 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1, and so on. Again, look up strumming patterns. It's a quick search on the internet, but you're going to have to understand what that 1 and or 1E and so we can go again 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Once you get that down, again, that opens up all kinds of doors for you to learn different songs. You're going to learn a strumming pattern and you're going to learn a chord progression. So going from D, A, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1, 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, get out there and practice. Okay, one last thing before we go. If you're using an electric guitar and you've got yourself an electric amp, I want to show you quickly how to get that set up. So I've got an electric guitar. I've got a lead or a chord here. You're going to want to make sure that you're plugged in, and then you do the same thing. Plug your lead into your guitar. Okay, make sure it's fully seated. Now I've got the volume on the guitar turned all the way down when I turn on my amp. Now, this particular amp has 3 different channels. Right now it's on a clean, and I have 5 positions here. I'm going to start all the way up into the 4th position, which is playing the neck and the middle together. What I like to do is I like to set everything pretty much at 12 o'clock. In this case, this is our EQ section, bass, middle, treble, and then here's our gain and volume. I'll just set everything at noon. Over here is the delay, and take a listen to what that sounds like. So you hear that as it trails off. Okay, I like a little bit of that on there. It just kind of fills it out a little bit. So with everything at noon, this is what my E would sound like. In a clean channel. Okay, if I switch to the overdrive channel, same E. Now, it's going to give it a little bit more distortion. You might have to turn your volume back just a little bit to your taste. Or if I roll that volume back a little bit more and roll up the gain, get a lot more distortion. So those are my 3 chords we just learned. D, A, E. All right, and then the final channel is a heavy gain, heavy distortion. So same thing. And there you have it. You got enough to get out there and be dangerous. All right, awesome job. You learned 3 chords. You learned all your open string names. You learned how to tune your guitar, hold your guitar, what all the parts of the guitar were, holding your pick, strumming, a couple strum patterns, how to read basic notation as far as your measure and your beats go. That's a lot to learn in one video in one go. So keep at it. Practice those things. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. Let me know. I'll respond. I'll help you out. Maybe we'll make another video to explain it even more so. But get out there, keep practicing, and show me what you can do. If you like this content, if you found it helpful, please like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. I appreciate everybody out there. Thanks for joining me. Have a great day.